Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Israeli American podcast hosted by ICAN, the Israeli American Civic Action Network. With me here today is Nicole Bernstein from Peer K through 12. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi. Interesting day today. It's been
very interesting day.
a bit of a roller coaster, I suppose, this week. I wouldn't be overstating it if I said that.
Absolutely. Big roller coaster today. So we are, this is our first Israeli American podcast. So we will be welcoming all of you to this new podcast and hopefully sharing with you on a frequent basis what's going on in the world. At ICAN, we are focused primarily on building pro-Israel networks at the state and local level on a range of issues related to foreign policy issues, but also domestic policy issues as well. And here tonight, we are going to talk about a couple things. Obviously, there's breaking news today. Today is October 8th, 2025, Wednesday. And there is some news coming out of the Middle East. We'll talk about it in a second. And then also, we will be talking about yesterday, Governor Newsom signed AB 715, which is being touted as California's anti-Semitism bill. But Nicole and I are going to go through it with some detail and see if it matches, if the substance matches the title. So, Nicole, do you want to jump into the big news that I think we have to touch on today? And actually, as the news develops, maybe we'll jump on and do another podcast. But maybe you can share with people what's breaking this afternoon.
So, yes, just about an hour or two ago, news came out of the Middle East, which is news that everyone's sort of been waiting for, that the terrorist group, Hamas, has finally agreed to the terms of ending the war, meaning they have agreed to release all of the hostages in exchange for Israel's sort of slow retreat out. I think, I have such mixed feelings about this because I'm like, first of all, please God, let those hostages who we think are alive still be alive. Some of the last videos and images that we've seen of some of them are just so horrific. I can't even talk about it. But it also means that they are going to be returning those who were murdered and kept, their bodies were kept captive, which is sort of a whole separate emotional thing. And Trump will be arriving in Israel on Sunday and be giving quite, I guess, a historic speech in the Knesset, which is fascinating to me. I'm like, I'm trying to visualize what that might look like and be like, having him come from DC and the pomp and circumstance of DC and him going into, like, what is an actual like political swamp in Jerusalem with the Knesset and, and all the circus that happens there. And I don't know, like I was thinking, I was in the car on the way home now, and I was thinking, I bet he's going to really love the food in Israel.
Oh, I'm sure
That's what was going through my mind, is like, oh, he's going to be so into food. They better give him the best food.
Well, we know the president is a big fan of McDonald's, and of course, there are McDonald's in in Israel. Hopefully, he won't be enjoying that cuisine.
He will not. It's like it's kosher McDonald's, so
it's kosher McDonald's.
You get a Big Mac there. You can just get without the cheese and everything. Which, no, but the fact that the hostages are going to be released, I think I was trying to put myself in the shoes of some of the families. I mean, some of these families don't know. They haven't seen or haven't heard anything. There are some hostages that we've received notice and they've released these, horrific, taunting videos and images. But there are many that we have not seen a single image, since October 7th, 2 years ago. So I'm really praying for them that their loved ones and that they're alive and that they'll be able to embrace them once again. It's like elation. It's fear of, how are they going to look? Are they going to be okay? Are they going to be able to find everybody? That's another question. I don't know if they're so well organized over there in crazy Gaza land. I don't know. I just have a lot of mixed feelings about it. The other thing that I was thinking about as I was listening to the news come in is I wonder how all of the former U.S. presidents are feeling that it's Trump.
Great question. Yeah.
who managed to get this done, who might be the one, dare I say it, to bring peace to the Middle East. Like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about certainly Obama. I can't imagine what this is feeling for
We
him.
can have we can have a whole show on Obama, the Obama administration and their
Because
adventures.
Obama did win the Nobel Peace Prize, right?
Yeah, I mean, Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize for
For
becoming
what?
president. I think it
Right.
was
He got elected,
it was like
right?
2 months out. Yeah, it was 2 months after he was sworn in. So let's see what happens. By the way, one of the things I want to say about this podcast is it's called the Israeli American Podcast because the objective of this show is to bring together Israeli and American perspectives. And so, as many of you may know, Nicole is an Israeli American. I'm just a plain old
Regular
American,
American.
regular American, and I think the magic, by the way, of the work that we do together, not just in advocacy and the work that we do with regard to legislation and policy, but also in moments like this. I certainly have feelings about what's going on there, and I'm cautiously optimistic, very proud that this president was successful, or hopefully will be successful in ending this, and perhaps bringing a new energy to the Middle East. So we shall see.
Yes.
All right.
And
So
a comment on that. Like, it's interesting because my perspective on these things is so I spend most of my day, certainly the last 2 years since October 7th, I watch Israeli news all day long. I do not watch American news. I watch Israeli news, and I bounce around between all of the channels in Israel, and I'm seeing how things are playing out there, and the political ups and downs in Israel. But one thing that is just really fascinating is the divide, I guess, between the political elite in Israel and the people, and the hostages who have already come back. This is something also that's very clear in their minds. Like they're sort of not interested in dealing with the people in the government. Every single one of them in the last hour that I've heard, the first thing they've said is thank God for President Trump. And it's interesting because, especially the kibbutzim that were attacked on October 7th, those were the most left wing,
absolutely,
most progressive of Israeli society, right? And there isn't really much left of the left in Israel.
yeah.
And so this whole everything from Trump being the one to get the deal, to return the hostages, to all of the families really only focusing their thank you to Trump and Am Yisrael, right? The people, not the government, but the people.
Yep.
And then the fallout from what it's going to be, and the IDF retreating slowly, keeping control. I also think it's hilarious that the person who's going to be overseeing this transition together with Trump is former British Prime Minister. So we're bringing England back to Palestine.
There is some irony there. Yes, exactly.
Oh, right. Interesting. But anyway, back to California and the craziness here.
Absolutely. I mean, look. Speaking of peace deals, and again, we do hope with this breaking news that all goes according to plan and that the hostages will be safely home by this weekend. But speaking about another difficult negotiation, let's start talking about the California legislative session in 2025. And today, we're going to look at the Assembly Bill 715, which was the state's so-called anti-Semitism bill. And the governor signed that yesterday symbolically on October 7th, which I think was kind of a nice gesture. And there were several components of the bill that we're going to go over today. Just to clarify some things, there was a lot of excitement. I think there's a lot of celebrating happening. And while I think that sure, you can celebrate a tough legislative session and a process that has concluded, but the issue is not open and is not closed, and it's far from ending. So that's kind of the goal that we want to update everyone about tonight with regard to AB 715. So maybe we'll go ahead and jump in. Do you have any comments about?
Yeah. So
before we get started,
I've been getting so many questions from so many people about 715, and a lot of people really are excited about this, and I suppose rightfully so. But I feel kind of like a jerk sometimes, where I'm like, the Debbie Downer. I'm like, well, yes, it is. However, there's some fine print that I'm not sure everyone has read, and the fine print actually really doesn't exactly match the hype. And I just want to be, again, cautiously optimistic. With regards to Newsom signing this on October 7th, that kind of annoyed me, to be honest. I would have much preferred he had done that symbolic signing on October 6th so that the Jewish community could go into mourning October 7th with at least something semi-positive, so I think that was a miss in terms of the PR on that. And also, like, a lot of us were kind of deep in a dark place yesterday, a very sad, dark place. And to have some of this news come out yesterday while we were trying to mourn, it was kind of annoying because there was a lot of detail to it and I couldn't really focus on it as much as I wanted to. And, so anyway, I would have much preferred if he had done it on the 6th and given us a little light to go into October 7th with. So.
Yeah, and on top of that, for his comms team, I don't know if they realized that there was a Jewish holiday that would prohibit a lot of religious Jews from.
His comms team are like next level crap. I'm sorry. I hate to be so blunt, but like,
there's the social. To be fair to the governor's office, there is a social media team, and then there's like the standard comms team that handles this kind of stuff. But
so social media team that runs his Twitter account or crap.
Yeah, I agree with that. They're a little unhinged. So let's go ahead and jump into AB 715. Nicole, should we do a quick recap of how we got here?
Maybe? Oh goodness. Talk about roller coaster.
Very quick recap. Maybe do you want me to do it real quick?
Yes.
Okay. So
take us back to February.
Take us back. So first of all, we can actually go back all the way to December 2024, a little over a year ago, when the California Department of Finance came out with a finding that ethnic studies had, in fact, not ever been funded to the extent that the AB 101 funding trigger for ethnic studies would be activated. Now, you're probably wondering, we're talking about ethnic studies versus an anti-Semitism bill. That's right, because this whole legislative initiative began with a bill that was introduced to address some of the content standards, or to create content standards for ethnic studies in the state of California. Now, when you look at the legislative history of ethnic studies, the kind of the last phase of really baking this subject into our California public schools would be the establishment of content standards, which would elevate that area of study basically on par with math, English, history, and social studies. That is something that we have major concerns with. And Nicole, you and I have done what really is ethnic studies. We would invite people to go back and look at that. Maybe we'll put a link in the description below. But essentially, this whole legislative year started with an effort to elevate and bake ethnic studies into our California public schools even further. We, of course, came out in strong opposition to that bill. Unfortunately, that bill was sponsored and supported by JPAC, which is the Jewish Public Affairs Committee in California, which comprises maybe 45 to 50 different organizations across the state. Unfortunately, they were simply misguided on this effort. I think they were misled on what this bill actually did and how it would impact schools, and actually how it would accelerate anti-Semitic content from getting into the classrooms and causing chaos among instructions and in other areas of public school life for our students, Jewish students, Israeli American students, and frankly any kind of student who is subjected to this bizarre radical extremist curriculum.
Pedagogy, praxis. They have so many weird terms to use for it. It's like, but yeah, it was. I think the misguidedness of it is that I guess a lot of the legislators, they're not experts on every single area. Okay, they couldn't possibly be, and so they do rely on expert advice from outside. But it was told they were told that the reason why there were so many issues with the implementation of ethnic studies in the districts is, because it was too open, it was too wide, and the guardrails were too broad, which I disagree with. But I think they were very specific in that you had to teach factual things. You had to, you couldn't bring anything that was going to be discriminatory against anybody for any of their protected classes or otherwise. You couldn't use any of the material or the content that was removed from the model curriculum because it was so biased and anti-Semitic and anti a lot of things. So it was pretty clear cut. It just the districts didn't follow it because nothing was going to happen to them if they didn't follow it. But I guess the biggest problem was this elevating it to the same level of importance as the other topics, which not only would affect the graduating high schoolers in California, but it would then just totally fast track ethnic studies being a requirement for admissions to the UC and the CSU systems. And that actually has global implications. So when we're talking about ethnic studies as what a lot of people think it is, oh, we're going to learn about different ethnic diversity. No, that's not what it is. Correct. What it is it's changing the way of thinking. It's changing the value system of American students to be anti-colonial, anti-imperialism, anti-democracy, anti-capitalism, anti-America, and anti-Israel. And I think that was like the misleading of it was, and it was hard. Those were hard conversations and arguments in the Jewish community, right? Because the Jewish community wants to be part of, I guess, the greater story of America, which I would argue that we already are, but the way that they were going about doing it was really inadvertently going to create so many more issues and problems. And to your credit, I mean, you were really on the political side, I think one of the only ones kind of pushing back and saying, wait, there's major issues with this. And from our perspective, Peer K-12, all the parents who we are working with in all of the school districts, there's this huge disconnect between what everyone thinks ethnic studies is, or even, let's say, you have an ethnic studies pilot in your district that seemed okay. That wasn't actually what was showing up in the classroom. So there's no oversight. And I think that the parents really know what's going on, and then you really knew and understood how this, bill process works, and the legislative process in a way that not a lot of Jewish orgs can, other than I think AIPAC. So
thank you.
That sort of combination, I think, from the real world experience of parents who we work with all the time, we're feeling in the districts on the ground, and not just Jewish parents, by the way. And then from your perspective on the legislative side, the bill to codify ethnic studies at the same level of science, math, and history, thankfully got enough pushback. I mean, I do remember sitting and watching together. We were live tweeting right together the May the May, or I guess mayhem, I should say, of all of the ethnic studies professors and teachers and students and coming in and just railing against this idea of having to teach truth and all this stuff. And by the way, that sort of stayed in this one,
unfortunately
reincarnation. Yeah. Anyway, I'll let you get back to the origin story of 715, but it's been a saga, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, I think we've pretty well covered what the initial effort was. And unfortunately, by the way, that misguided piece of legislation, 1468, took up 4.5 months of legislative time. It took up a lot of time that we should have been talking about the issue of anti-Semitism in California public schools. We should have been talking about the activist teachers that are really giving the majority of teachers a bad name and giving the California public school system a bad name. Absolutely. And we wasted a lot of time on this misguided piece of legislation, AB 1468. And thankfully, it was set aside finally to focus on anti-Semitism. Supposedly, right? That was the conversation, to supposedly focus on anti-Semitism. In July of this year, AB 1468 was pulled, and it was replaced with Assembly Bill 715, which was a gut and amend piece of legislation. Gut and amend means that you take an existing piece of legislation, you cut out all of the text, and you replace it with, or you amend new text into it, so you can completely change the purpose of the legislation.
Wait, can you just explain to people why that is necessary? Because I think there's also some confusion about the process of this. Like, why wouldn't they just introduce a whole new bill in July after they realized that 1468 was not a good idea?
Yeah, and we should say later on as well why there's another piece of legislation. It's not just AB 715. And we'll look at this when we look at the full bill, but there's another bill. I'm sorry to the listeners and viewers. There's another bill called SB 48 that we will talk about as well that has some relevance. To answer your question of why we needed to gut and amend, so a legislative session consists of a very strict calendar, a pretty strict calendar, and the last day to introduce legislation was February 21st. So this year. So anything that needs to be introduced after February 21st either needs a special waiver from leadership, which is usually not done, or you can do what's called a gut and amend. And that's taking an existing piece of legislation. So let's say you're a legislator and you want to work on something that maybe it's a code fix or it's something relatively innocuous. It's probably not going to be one of your showcase bills that you're going to set aside for the session. A showcase bill might be if you're focused on crime or public safety, for example. Maybe you've got a public safety bill that you're going to champion for that legislative session. That's probably not going to be a gut and amend candidate for you in your efforts. You'll probably work on something more innocuous. And I believe, by the way, AB 715 was some sort of regulatory issue that Zabur or Adis had originally introduced. So because we had missed this deadline and because we wasted 4.5 months talking about ethnic studies and how destructive it is to our classrooms, we weren't able to get the bill introduced on time so that we could have this ongoing discussion. So hopefully that explains why we needed to gut and amend. And it also should explain to people why we had such a condensed timeline. So sure, everybody is celebrating today because it definitely seemed like this bill would not go through. But that fact that the bill would not go through is because, again, we wasted 4.5 months on a misguided effort related to ethnic studies. And by the way, to your point about why it was misguided and what happens, bear in mind, again, we're an organization that is focused on building state and local pro-Israel networks, professionally run, that actually have experience in doing legislative action and policy making and that kind of thing. The Jewish community today across America, for the most part, does not have that capability. Usually, Jewish communities at the state level or at the local level will hire some lobbyist for an off,
like funding for security for synagogues, right?
funding
And
for
stuff like
security
that.
grants.
Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
100%. And there's domestic issues like Meals on Wheels for seniors or service and support for vulnerable members of the community. And that's typically where those organizations have their area of expertise. Education policy is not an area of expertise, unfortunately,
No.
for many of these organizations. And Californians this year are paying the price to a certain extent. So let's go ahead and dive into AB 715. For those viewing, I'm going to pull up an actual version of the bill, the latest, the version that was chaptered, actually. And we'll go through it somewhat quickly. And then we will look at some of the comments made by some other legislators in relation to this bill so we can get a better sense of where this policy effort is going. Again, not just on the reading of the text of the bill, which I think many people are hanging on to, but we also need to look at what the policymakers, the people who drafted this bill, and what they have in mind this coming January when the legislature reconvenes. Does that sound good?
Yes.
All
And
right.
can we just say how shockingly bad the website is for California legislative? This is, what is Gavin Newsom likes to talk about all the time, the fifth largest economy in the world. I think now he's saying fourth. We have the shittiest website for our state legislature. It looks like it was built in 1986 and has never been updated.
So forgive us. Yeah. So forgive us for showing what's on the screen. It's not pretty, but it's the best. It's the best California has given us.
That's so typical.
So as you can see, as it says here at the top, this was approved by the governor on October 7th, 2025, and of course filed with the Secretary of State. AB 715, primarily authored by Assembly members Rick Zabur and Don Adis. There were some co-authors here that they don't show up on the chaptered version of the bill, but there were some co-authors from what are called the diversity caucuses. So the diversity caucuses is Latino caucus, Asian American caucus, and so on. So basically, this bill has a few key parts. I'm skimming through this part that I skimmed through here is simply a what's called the Legislative Council's Digest. This is a plain reading of the text of the bill. So it kind of describes for you what the bill will do, what existing law does.
Can I just tell you though, from a parent perspective, like you look at this and it just looks like it's just, do you remember Charlie Brown? It was like the teacher was talking, it's like, wah, 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 wah. That's what this looks like, right? It's just, there's so many words on here.
Yeah.
It's a lot of jargon, a lot of lingo. Right. It's a lot of blah, blah. Which it is, I think, one of the main reasons why it's been so hard for parents to really kind of wrap their heads around, well, what does it actually mean, right?
Yep.
So,
Dylan,
tell us what it means.
All right, so there's a few key sections of the bill, and I'll kind of maybe highlight them, and then we'll dive into each one. So the first section is what are called legislative findings. Legislative findings are basically facts or positions of the legislature that they want to put into the bill to describe and explain legislative intent around the bill.
Which is why we think we need this bill, right? Here's why we think this is needed.
Yep. So I will say that I very much appreciate this, a lot of this language, especially point C here, where it says it has been well documented that Jewish and Israeli American pupils across California are facing a widespread surge in anti-Semitic discrimination, harassment, and bullying. I would say that this admission, and now it is in law, it is in legislative text here, or statutory text, that there has been a well-documented history now, especially post 10/7, of Jewish and Israeli American students being harassed in California public schools. So I think that's a key finding here in the legislative findings. There are several more that kind of go through different issues, and they highlight the United States national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. For Democratic legislators, this is a big deal because this gives them a touchstone with the former administration about how to combat anti-Semitism, because unfortunately, Democratic legislators are not taking any advice from the current administration or Republican leaders who, by the way, may have great ideas, and they do have great ideas. So at the very least, they were able to touch on the Biden plan, which I will note initially included CARE, the Council for American Islamic Relations.
God's sakes.
The second section of the bill actually goes into the substance of the bill. So this is section 2. So this amends the different education codes. This first section here talks a little bit about instruction and instructional materials. So we'll go through that.
Boring stuff. Boring.
It's important. We'll touch on it, but it is important.
It's so important actually what is written in there, because they talk about instructional materials. They talk about content, that's brought in. They're talking about teacher training, which is a massive issue in California. They talk about, how things should be approved and where approved and who approves it and how much and all this stuff. And it's just like, it's so dense and hard to get through.
So that's why we're here. We will help our listeners and viewers through this. So section 3 here is discussing a little bit about complaint processes and other aspects of complaints, and it also interestingly, it adds a notification here that says by October 1st of each year, department shall issue management bulletin to all local educational agencies. So these sections here that we went through are different elements of the bill. By the way, very important. They probably don't get enough attention, but they deal with aspects that the CDE has to now comply with. That CDE stands for the California Department of Education. So these are those elements of the bill here. Next, we go into a major section of the bill, which establishes a new Office of Civil Rights. So this is Section 5 of the bill, which adds Chapter 5, which establishes what is called the Office of Civil Rights. And so this is that section there. and we'll go through this here in detail. And there was one other element of the bill that we wanted to touch on. Sorry, let me go through this.
The Office of Civil Rights that they added, it was interesting because when I first saw that, I was like, but we already have an Office of Civil Rights in California.
Correct.
We have one at the
Correct.
federal level, and we have an Office of Civil Rights at the state level. And actually, this has been something that that PRK has been really shouting from the rooftops is there are actually already existing laws that are supposed to protect students, including students, but the Office of Civil Rights at the California state level has not really been investigating. There are very, very few examples that the CDE actually investigated and actually found that there were districts at fault for discrimination against their Jewish students. But the Office of Civil Rights that this is talking about, which was very confusing, it is housed under government operations. And when I first heard that, I was like, well, why do you need it in government operations when we already have an Office of Civil Rights actually has some legal responsibilities. The government operations sounds more like like a pencil pushing, around the desk kind of department. So no offense if you work in government operations, but like, what is that?
So my belief is, and again, I don't know this because I wasn't privy to the conversations behind the scenes when they decided to move the Office of Civil Rights or whatever this effort is out of CDE into GovOps. But I suspect that the reason they moved it to government operations is because, as you said, there is an existing Office of Civil Rights within the California Department of Education. And GovOps is primarily run by the governor's office, as far as I understand. It's very much controlled by the governor's office, and I think they wanted to assert some additional authorities in that regard.
I mean, for me, what it said was that there would be no legal recourse if this new coordinator, right? And
they've defined that in law. Actually, we should talk about that. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's a little foreshadowing there, but I was very confused. I'm like, why are we creating a whole new Office of Civil Rights? We have that already. It's so redundant. I mean, obviously government, it's redundant, but like that, I didn't realize it at the time, but now after seeing what was posted yesterday, we now know what that means for sure. So we'll get into that in a minute.
One other aspect of this bill that I want to touch on is Section 12 at the very end, where it says this act shall become operative only if Senate Bill 48 of the 2025-2026 regular session is enacted and becomes effective on or before January 1st, 2026.
Yeah.
Now, that's a very interesting element of this bill. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it kind of as we close out the conversation around this bill. But that's a very, I'll say, sneaky and contrived way to turn this bill into what is called an anti-Semitism bill. If you look further up in this bill, under the Office of Civil Rights, they do establish a anti-Semitism coordinator, which has, let me scroll up here and find it, which has certain duties and responsibilities. But here it is. So here it is, the Antisemitism Prevention Coordinator. There are other coordinators that are housed in Senate Bill 48 that do similar things as to the Antisemitism Prevention Coordinator. The reason they were not included in this version of the bill is because if you were to add all those other coordinators, this ceases to become an anti-Semitism bill.
Well, and it becomes an All Lives Matter bill.
It becomes an All Lives Matter bill, which that's a debate to have. People can have that discussion. My point is, I don't appreciate the nature by which this was contrived to call it an anti-Semitism effort. Let's be straight. There are discriminatory actions happening in California public schools, discriminating against many people. Jews are number one. Jews are the number one target, to be very clear. It's not to say they're the exclusive target, but to say that this is an anti-Semitism bill is a trick that was done. And that last section there where they talk about SB 48 is where the trick lies, right? Because now they're connected. If one passes without the other, none of them passed.
Wait, I call it the comorbidity clause.
Comorbidity. Well, the amazing thing is Sasha Renee Perez, who is the California State Senate Education Committee chairwoman, which we will see here in a second, she herself said that she wished the provisions of SB 48 were included in AB 715.
715.
715. So there's no reason why they couldn't have been legislatively. They could have edited the text. In my opinion, they did that because they wanted to have an anti-Semitism bill, quote unquote,
Labeled as such, right?
and a win at the end of the day. Yeah. So that's a first little unfortunate little game that was being played with this bill. But it is what it is. Let's go through some of the detailed provisions of this bill now.
Well, wait. So that anti-Semitism coordinator, just because we were on it for those who are listening. So this role is really just sort of coordinating, supervising within this government operations department. And Dylan, if it's okay, I'm just going to read a couple of things here. It's just develop, consult, and provide anti-Semitism education to teachers and staff, the governing board or body of trustee members, administrators, and other local education agency. That's the local school districts, the LEAs, the personnel to identify and proactively prevent anti-Semitism. Many of them cannot, and we are dealing with a very big case right now in San Diego, where is just such an example happened. Where they didn't realize what they had on their hands. The next is to make recommendations in coordination with the state board, the legislature, and on legislation, future legislation for the prevention of anti-Semitism in educational settings, which I would argue is kind of ridiculous because you don't need more legislation to prevent. What you need is to have actual accountability when it happens, which we kind of already have. So, okay, next, engage and advise the actions taken by the office on issues relating to anti-Semitism in the Jewish community. That is such a word salad. I don't even know if that means that they just needed like a number 3 provision here. Like you've got to engage and advise on actions to be taken together with the Jewish community. Next is that you track and report on these instances from TK actually and kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. So they're going to have to figure out how to centralize and collect these reports of all these incidents, which I'm sure is going to be a fun time for them, considering there's thousands. And the next one is engage with relevant community stakeholders. I don't know how they're going to define that, as determined by the anti-Semitism prevention coordinator. Okay, so whoever gets plugged in for this role at the pleasure of the governor to be approved by the Senate will determine who the appropriate stakeholders are. That to me is like a big red flag.
Yeah, huge. That's a huge concern, especially by the way, if somebody like Katie Porter were to become governor. I think we have major concerns. And by the way, we should say that the coordinators, which essentially these are all Title VI coordinators, right? I mean, essentially the state of California has created a mechanism to hire 4 or 5 Title VI coordinators specifically for some communities.
Each, yeah.
So that's essentially what this is, and we don't know who those people will be. And
so there's a lot of engaging and advising, a lot of recommendations. Not a lot of actual
no enforcement,
accountability, or oversight. It's just a lot of talking, a lot of listening sessions, which, for parents out there in the districts will roll their eyes at that. A lot of listening sessions and discussions with certain stakeholders.
Yep.
We all know what that means. That means they are going to continue to ignore the parents. I can promise you that.
Most likely. That is most likely correct. So that's the anti-Semitism coordinator within this new Office of Civil Rights. If we go up a little bit and talk a little bit about the office itself, again, I mean, there's a lot of text here. It essentially is a technical advice office where, and reporting, it looks like. I will say I'd be interested to see how the reporting looks and what the reports actually look like, and if, by the way, these coordinators are actually able to comply with this law and issue the reports that the statute requires. So we shall see. And it even says here at the end, beginning on January 1, 2027, annually review a report that department shall provide to the Office of Civil Rights that includes a summary of all complaints made pursuant to a section that involved discrimination. So, I mean, look, the reporting should be interesting. We will see what happens.
Is that kind of like, well, I shouldn't say, but these reports that come out a year after something's happened and then you can't actually do anything about it. There's another like big report that comes out about 7 to 8 months after the incidents actually happen, reports of antisemitism that comes out. And it is really, doesn't really help anybody other than to know what happened last year, which we all already know. So, yeah.
So
okay, on to the next piece of evidence that we have.
Yeah. So I think that's the bill pretty much. Again, it just to review, establishes an Office of Civil Rights, establishes a anti-Semitism coordinator, which essentially is a Title VI coordinator with a new title, and ties this statute to additional statutory language, which was signed into law under another piece of legislation called SB 48, which adds other kinds of civil rights coordinators, making this overall effort, as you said, kind of an all lives matter civil rights effort.
See, but the language here is where I really get annoyed with the language that they use. Okay, so these coordinators, in an effort to ensure students are free from all forms of discrimination, instead of saying that districts are protecting and following the law in protecting their students. Okay,
Correct.
that is actually what we need laws to do, is to hold those accountable who are not protecting the students. This is like, oh, we're going to make sure that all the students are free from discrimination and all the bad, yucky words. No, we need laws that hold districts accountable when they don't protect their students according to law. That's what we need. And that's what we are continuously not getting from the legislators. And it drives me nuts because all of these things are they all sound so fancy schmancy. And at the end of the day, my kid, if something happens in school, nothing. Well, this will do absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting really annoyed right now because
Understood. Yeah, I mean, the challenge is that it seems in California that there's a real apprehension about enforcing the law on certain kinds of communities. And as we well know, the teachers' unions are a very powerful political entity. By the way, teachers' unions, to my mind, to my opinion, are more about activism than they are about collective bargaining. They're not teachers.
That's not even an opinion. They flat out say that all over the website. They say that every time they go up on a stage, every social media post that they have, they talk about it all the time. They're like, we are grooming activists. We are activists. This is an activist thing. And then you have the teachers who are actually in classrooms are like, wait, but I just want to,
teach,
do right by my kids. Yeah. In my class. Like, yeah.
I don't want to indoctrinate. Yeah. So I mean, there seems to be a real apprehension about holding the teachers union accountable and holding the activist teachers accountable. Now, we're not saying certainly not all teachers are bad, but there is a clear effort among the organized unions across this state, both statewide with the CTA and of course the local unions as well, to prioritize activism over their actual duty, which is collective bargaining and helping to protect teachers. So they have really been derelict in their duty as far as I'm concerned. And I think we've seen this. And it's unfortunate that the legislature and the executive branch in California cannot hold these people to account. And here's where now people may say
they wouldn't be in the state legislature.
Bingo. Exactly.
Without the teacher unions, because the teacher unions are the ones that paid for their campaigns.
Exactly.
And so why would they hold accountable those who actually put them in the seat of power? What
100%.
is so ironic to me about all of these conversations is when the teacher unions, and I'm going to go back to ethnic studies for a second, they talk about systems of power, and the system of power that really is oppressing people in this country are the teacher unions with their radical ideologies are holding everybody hostage. And I use that word very intentionally, certainly today. But yeah, look, if you go back and look at the teacher union, CTA, the California Teachers Association, every single piece of information or content that they have put out this year, it's really been about two things. Right? They're demanding ceasefire and an end to Israel. They want to get rid of Israel completely. And they're totally, absolutely 100% against a bill that, says that it protects Jewish students in classrooms. They were violently against any sort of, we don't want our speech, quote unquote, hindered in classrooms by having to teach the truth.
Yeah.
Right. They were so upset about that clause that, all of the teaching materials and curriculum had to be fact-based. They were really upset about that. Like, no normal teacher that I have ever met thinks that is sane. So the teacher unions versus the teachers are like, you want a real shocker? Go look at the CTA social media for the last, 4 or 5 months. And all you'll see on there is that 715 is the most evil, horrible thing to ever come across the California state legislature. And all it does, just like a big nothing burger, but it basically says, hey, hating Jewish students because they're Jews is really bad. So don't do it.
Yeah.
And
so
they hated to be told that.
So we are harping on this, for those of you wondering why we're emphasizing this, because there's a key paragraph. It's the last paragraph of the signing statement of the governor, where he says the following. As AB 715 moved through the legislative process, representatives from the entire education ecosystem, including teachers, administrators, school boards, school staff, students, and civil rights organizations, expressed deep commitment to the goals of the bill. That's a little stretch. It's a little bit of a stretch, my friends.
Very flowery words that, okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah, they may have said some performative words that expressed, again, all lives mattering of students, but we'll believe it when we see it. Mm-hmm. Along with urgent concerns, this is the key part, along with urgent concerns about unintended consequences. Now, here's the key sentence. I appreciate the firm commitments made by the authors of AB 715 to work quickly on a follow-up measure next year to continue addressing these issues.
And
that is key. That is key, because what does that tell us? Now, we know that from the legislative hearings that there was, and actually the floor statements as well during the votes on these bills, that quote unquote cleanup legislation will be introduced, and cleanup legislation, which, by the way, cleanup legislation, there's no technical legislative term for quote cleanup legislation. Cleanup legislation is when you run out the clock because you didn't use your legislative time wisely through the session, and now you have to pass something to satisfy a certain constituency, but you don't have enough time to do the kind of legal analysis to make sure that the text will not have unintended consequences or should not have unintended consequences.
Oh, I'm so glad that these are the people who are in charge of literally everything in California. Like, that is just wow.
Absolutely
amazing.
So there was this term thrown around called cleanup legislation. By the way, not just this bill, but on many other issues that I was watching in the legislature this year. So that tells me, by the way, that the legislature is dysfunctional, right? If you get to the end of your session and you have to talk about quote unquote cleanup legislation because you didn't have time to check your text before it gets to the governor's desk, there's a problem with the process.
By the way, well, like the fact that they were, and I don't know if this is like a normal thing, you do this all the time, but like the Friday night that they were on the floor until, I believe,
3 a.m.
At 3 a.m. Okay. Yeah. And I watched until 1 a.m. And then I was like, oh, I can't deal with this anymore. So they had left so much to do for the very last second. And they were supposed to, it was supposed to happen by midnight of that Friday. I can't remember what that was.
The 12th, September 12th.
September 12th. Okay. It was a Friday, which again, very annoying that it's on a Shabbat, like we have Shabbat dinner. And then I had to get back online, which I really, really don't like doing on Shabbat, and watch these folks like argue and shout and talk about all these bills that they somehow didn't have time to deal with. I mean, it felt like there was like 80 or so bills that they left for midnight on the last day, which obviously went into the next day technically, but it was like this circus. And there were all these protesters in the galley, which you could hear. And they kept saying, the gallery, and they kept saying, oh, just, you won't be able to hear the protesters. That's not true.
We could hear them.
We could hear protesters. It was a
Absolutely.
voting or something, and they were shouting about, like, you're complicit in whatever, genocide. They were
Yeah.
like discussing some, I don't know, home ownership or, water bill or something. And those code pinkers were up there screaming about, I don't know what, but it was so jarring to watch this circus. And then they finally got to 7:15, and it was irritating. But that's this last point here, this last sentence of the cleanup and the making sure that all of those concerns of the unintended quote unquote consequences, you have that, and then you look at what Lena said and how she said it, which I don't know if you have that ready here, if we can
We are ready.
That you look at that, and anybody who thinks that 7:15 was all about protecting Jewish students, just listen to
let's
our elected officials talk about what it really is about.
So let's do maybe the chairwoman of the Senate Education Committee first. So let's let her explain a little bit about the bill. By the way, if you don't believe us about what AB 715 actually is or does, don't take our word for it. Listen to the committee chairwoman explain the bill. Yeah. Should we go ahead and jump into?
Let's jump over and let's hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
So we are going to here now listen to Senator Sasha Renee Perez, who is a California state senator from the Pasadena area, and she is going to explain the bill. We're not going to play it. It's a 4.5 minute segment. I might skip around because she's repetitive, but she will go ahead and explain to us what this bill is all about.
It is incredibly, challenging to talk about, this issue in this moment, because I recognize, unfortunately, as we discuss these issues around anti-Semitism, that much of it has become conflicted with, what is happening right now in Gaza. And I want to recognize that. And I think, many of you recognize that. That's why
she is one of the people, quote unquote, doing the conflicting. She says the discussion around combating anti-Semitism in California public schools is being, quote, conflicted with what is currently happening in Gaza. I would argue that she is one of the perpetrators of that confliction.
So many
100%.
Our office have expressed concern with equating criticisms of Israel with anti-Semitism. And that was why it was such a big priority for us to make sure that that was taken out of the bill.
I want to state, by the way, for the record, especially coming from ICAN as an Israeli-American advocacy organization, essentially what she is advocating for here. Now, I believe in the enforcement of law. This will not be the case, but essentially what she is advocating for here is an exception. Now, Nicole, you're an Israeli-American. Your children are Israeli-American. What she is advocating for is an exception to any kind of national origin discrimination that you or your family may face in California public schools. She is saying that no criticism of Israel can ever be discriminatory, essentially is what she's saying. She didn't just say it here. She says it multiple times in this committee, but she also says it on the floor of the Senate.
Yes.
And I think that's a massive. Now, that is a failure, by the way, on the one hand, of American Jewish organizations. It's a failure of JPAC to let people understand that Israeli Americans exist and that they deserve the same kind of protections. But as usual, these legacy organizations and establishment groups exclude Israelis and Israeli Americans and Israel.
By the way,
not included in the conversation, which I think, sorry to interrupt, but yeah. I think that is totally unacceptable, and it falls on us. Now, JPAC does what JPAC does, and those other groups do what they do. But it now falls on us, Nicole, and everybody watching and who's a member of the ICAN team and family. We have to be in Sacramento much more often. We have to show these people who Israelis in America are, who Israelis in California are, and that our public school students are facing massive discrimination, systemic discrimination by the very people who help put these people in office, and I mean the teachers' unions. Sorry.
Yes,
Nicole,
and what's really annoying to me about that is, okay, their inability to separate Israel from Jews. There are more than 20% of the Israeli population is Arab. Vast majority of Muslims, some are Christians, right? There are Bedouins, there are Druze, there are Baha'i. Like Israelis come in as many shapes and colors and affiliations as Americans do. And so when you are anti-Israel in this country or in Canada or in, any of these Western countries, you are not just discriminated against Jews in Israel. You are discriminated against all of Israel. And that is so antithetical to what they're always claiming that they are, but they cannot separate the two. And I will give you another example. I was recently on a webinar where we had, 4 people who were pro ethnic studies and 4 people who were against ethnic studies. And we were giving our positions. And, the idea was to try to hear the other side, the other perspective in a mature and sort of, way where you could actually have a discussion, not screaming. And there was one question that came in from the audience, from the watchers, that said, for those who are pro, what do you say when people, show you that there's so much anti-Semitism in ethnic studies? And one of the teachers responded by saying, well, no, we talk about anti-Semitism a lot. In fact, we have to talk about what's happening in foreign countries and foreign wars because it's what's happening right now, and the kids deserve to know and understand. And it was like, I was like, what? They're asking you about Jewish kids here, and you're talking about Israel there. Like, they cannot separate the two. And, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's on us, on the Israeli Americans. And we sort of didn't, I don't know if it's the American Jewish orgs or if it's people like me. Like, I wasn't loud enough in expressing my Israeli identity. I'm sort of I sort of pass as an American Jew, right? But like, maybe it's on me. And so I don't know, it's frustrating, but we have to start being a lot more vocal. And does she not know that more than 20% of Israel's population is not even Jewish? Like, that's a huge chunk.
Yeah,
okay?
She doesn't know anything about it. She knows nothing. She knows nothing. She knows nothing about Israel. She knows nothing about Israel.
As an Israeli, that she would say that, right?
Yeah. Ugh. She knows nothing about Israel, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to fall on us to educate officials like this one about what Israel actually is and what Israelis are, and that Israelis are living, by the way, in her district as well.
Yep.
All right, so let's hear a little bit further what she has to say. And she's going to explain the bill in detail, what she's taken out.
And I know many of our education unions have raised that as well. Before I came here to the state Senate, I was mayor of the city of Alhambra. And while I was mayor of the city of Alhambra, we passed a ceasefire resolution. I made a statement several months ago calling out what was happening in Gaza, the starvation that we've seen, and
which is
calling
Hamas's
out
fault,
the fact
by the way,
that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal.
So I just want to pause here also just to comment. She says the fact that Bibi Netanyahu is a war criminal. The fact that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal. Now, the fact that one of the issues for our listeners and viewers is that there is concern around what's called factually accurate instruction. And these legislators are very concerned about factually accurate instruction. What did she just say? The fact that Netanyahu is a war criminal. Madam Chairwoman, it is not a fact that Bibi Netanyahu is a war criminal. He is not a war criminal. It is not a fact, and you are wrong. And shame on you, and I hope you're watching this, shame on you for misleading the viewers and misleading the public in that way, especially as chair of the Education Committee, a position I don't believe you are qualified to hold.
What's amazing to me is how many anti-bias trainings do you think she went through in all of her iterations in public office that, I mean, have zero comprehension of what she just said. I don't know how many actual military experts in this world, not Jewish, not Israeli, not even American, who talk all the time about how shocked they are that the way Israel has conducted this war, there are so few civilian casualties. And those who are casualties are because Hamas was using them as human shields, and that's war. But the fact that there are so few casualties is shocking to military experts. And here she is trying to pass off her biased opinion as fact, which is exactly like you said, the irony of this is exactly what AB 17 is supposed to correct.
You got it.
And here she is saying it as fact. Like this is the problem. I don't expect legislators to know everything about Israel. I don't expect them to know everything about what's going on over there. But then don't pretend like you're presenting your opinion that you got off social media or something. And by the way, Alhambra, I don't know why you think that passing a ceasefire resolution in your town in California is relevant.
It's not relevant. Yeah. No, what we have, and again, we'll, there's a whole other podcast to discuss what I'm about to say, but there are many officials in California who sneak into their city councils. And most city councils, by the way, are part-time. These are not full-time jobs. When she says she was the mayor of Alhambra, she was not the elected mayor of Alhambra. She rotated in on a council that rotates, everybody becomes mayor who sits on the council.
Everyone gets a trophy.
And her professional expertise is working at a nonprofit at a Cal State University prior to serving in the Senate. So she was a part-time city council member for a small city, and now she's up here making proclamations.
Right, but Dylan, she did solve peace in the Middle East because she passed a ceasefire resolution, right?
Oh, right. She did do that. That's right.
So let's not knock that.
Okay.
After that happened, there were many people that reached out that said that I had no right to be able to negotiate this bill because of the opinions that I had, because I had passed a ceasefire resolution previously. And I share that so that other folks in this room can understand that we can have a diversity of opinions on this issue. I want to make sure that we're resolving anti-Semitism in our schools. That is a real problem. That is a real issue.
Spreading lies as fact.
I also recognize that what is happening in Gaza is criminal.
What is happening in Gaza is not criminal. What is happening in Gaza is the most moral army in the world is defeating a global terrorist organization sponsored by the Islamic Republic of Iran and positioned in a place where the international law and international community are holding Israel to a standard that no other nation is being held to, and yet they are still exceeding every standard. And yet this legislator is lying on the dais.
Yes.
What is happening in Gaza is not criminal.
And it would be absolutely ridiculous if I did not acknowledge that. And I want to share that with you all because that is my truth, and it would be irresponsible for
your truth is irrelevant.
Is it her lived experience? She's living her experience right now.
Her lived experience of reading.
I love the woman sitting next to her is hilarious, by the way.
By the way, for those
glasses with the mask, she's got like the N95 mask, right? Like it's 2020, circa 2020. And she's with like the deadest look in her eye, like, oh my! I think at this point of the meeting, but it was like midnight, wasn't it?
It was very
late. So late. It was late. Look at the woman next to her. She's like, God, just stop already. Just do the vote. I'm tired.
Yeah. The for those listening and watching, this hearing took place on September 10th, about a month ago. So this was not a long time ago. This was just about a month ago.
For me to not acknowledge those things. Now, in working on this bill, there were a number of major amendments that we had the authors take. And we did not agree on a number of things as well. And I recognize that there's still much work to be done. But I want to go over a number of the bill amendments that were made that I think are really significant, and also the direction that this bill is moving.
Here's another gut slice and
dice.
The
bill does not directly define anti-Semitism, and it no longer defines or includes provisions specific to an anti-Semitic learning environment. This was a big priority to make sure that we were addressing. The bill no longer prescribes requirements for the adoption of instructional materials regarding Jews, Israel, or the Israel-Palestine conflict. This bill continues to establish an anti-Semitism prevention coordinator, but that position now will be under the administration of a new Office of Civil Rights, which is also established by the bill. Now, what's also important, and you don't see reflected here, and I wish it was reflected here.
Key. This is key. Now, I want to highlight this because what she's saying is, I wish it was reflected here.
But There is separate legislation that is moving, and that is SB 48, which is authored by Senator Gonzalez, which establishes additional discrimination prevention coordinators to address religious, racial, gender, and LGBTQ discrimination. Now, there's talks about what other coordinators can be established, but we still haven't flushed a lot of that out. Those are amendments that are going to be made come early next year. But SB 48 is going to be moving forward in the process, because we know if we're going to have an Office of Civil Rights, it needs to work on all of the discrimination that our students face in schools. And whether that's anti-Semitism, whether that's anti-Black racism, whether that's a discrimination that trans kids face, that our students do deserve to have supports.
So that's pretty much her analysis of the bill, and I think that's very key there at the end, where she again references that other bill, SB 48, which she says, I wish it was included in AB 715, and it should, and frankly, it should have been, but that would have changed the nature of the bill from being, and frankly, if you were to look at the Legislative Council Digest, it could not be called an anti-Semitism bill. It would be called an anti-discrimination bill. And so I'm a little disappointed that that game was played. There's no reason why that other text should have been kept in a separate piece of legislation and constructed that way, except to create the perception that this is uniquely.
Right. Well, I mean, that's politics, right? I think that's the hardest thing for people to really understand is that there's intention, and what I think legislators sometimes want to do for their constituents, which very well may be honest and forthright and all the good things. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of policy and of law and bills, politics is a dirty game. Politics is all about wheeling, dealing. You have to compromise. You take this from here, I'll give you this from there. And sometimes these deals are done behind closed doors, under the table, and we don't know what those deals are until it comes out with something like this. I mean, there have been so many examples this year, with first starting with the ethnic studies and then with the anti-Semitism bill, that everyone was like, oh, it's great, it's this, isn't it? We're like, well, we don't know. And we were being sort of cast, but I mean, PRK and you, ICAN and a few other grassroots orgs out there, that we were just sort of we didn't have the rose-colored glasses on. And we were like, well, politics is a dirty game, everyone. So just proceed with caution and don't get too excited, because we don't know what we don't know until they say it here. And now we're going to go to Ms. Gonzalez, and this one was really the one that got me. And I do love how she talks about her bill, SB 84, even though it's actually 48, but she forgot anyway. So let's on this one, because this was even better than the other one.
I don't know if she mentions SB 48 in this segment,
in this clip.
In this particular clip, but this particular clip is kind of gives away the game, right? So she touches, and we're wrapping up the end of this podcast. We've been going for an hour. Apologize, but she is going to kind of talk about where we started. Again, as we started in the beginning of this podcast, we spoke about SB 48 and what this all really is about. And frankly, it's all about ethnic studies at the end of the day. So let's see what Lena.
Don't take our word for it.
Don't take our word for it. Take the word of Diversity Caucus Chair for Latino Caucus, Senator Lena Gonzalez. Here's what she says.
And then also just working with our Diversity Caucus members, the chairs of the Black Caucus and the API Caucus and the LGBTQ Caucus have been really, 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 really determined to figure out a way. This all started, I will say, and I know we compartmentalize, but it's still very important, with the fact that the diversity caucuses want ethnic studies. We absolutely believe in ethnic studies. We want ethnic studies to move forward. It would have put guardrails in, which I think could have...
Which we already had, but didn't work.
I have to say, this is fascinating to me, because this one line here that she says, I want ethnic studies to move forward. We could have put guardrails in. She's referring to AB 1468. She's referring specifically to AB 1468. And it appears that she was a proponent of this bill. So that to me is fascinating. And I have to say that I suspect that next year or even the year after, because next year I think we're going to see the funding, right? They're going to try to fund ethnic studies. For those listening or watching, to fund ethnic studies fully, to trigger the graduation mandate, you must, the legislature must put in, I think it's like
280 million or something.
It's two something. Yeah. It's like 250, 275, something like that. Which, by the way, is less than the cost of the Prop 50 effort special election, which is 300 million, over 300 million.
Yeah.
By the way, ICAN is taking the position to vote no on Prop 50. If you're listening,
no.
Vote no on Prop 50. We don't need to give these people more power. So what she's saying here is that she liked the content standards. She liked the guardrails. And I would be surprised, frankly, if in the next at least 1 or 2 years or legislative sessions, we don't see a replica of 1468 move forward, or at least be introduced. Because I have to tell you that in the journey of ethnic studies law and legislation in the state of California, that's AB 1468 would have been the culminating piece that would have embedded and infused that area of study within California public schools. And again,
globally, by the way, I have to say this, like, it would have created a situation where it's not just a California thing. Correct. It would have been a admissions requirement, which then would have made this a global issue. Correct. And the danger of that happening is something I cannot understate. Like, we cannot allow that to happen. And so we are going to have to be very vigilant and watch and Absolutely. Make sure that doesn't happen. We have to grab our notes from this past year and kind of, I guess, recycle them. But yeah.
So I paused it here because, again, just to reiterate, I think it's fascinating that she seems to have been in support of 1468. And I think that's fascinating because we know that there was a big push, that the Diversity Caucus chairs expressed concern around 1468. I think their only root of concern was that Jews were authoring it or pushing it. Because honestly,
I think also the transparency piece and the oversight of 1468 was not something that they were into.
Sure. Yeah. There was some modest transparency and oversight. And of course, they couldn't countenance that. But again, those things could be removed by amendment later on. They didn't let it go through the legislative process. I think it'll be fascinating to see what happens in the future going forward. So let's listen to the last minute or so of her comments.
Some of these issues, we want our stories told as Black community members, as Latino community members, as Native community members, as API community members, as a mom right now who has a child in public schools. I have to explain to my child a little bit more about Latino history, but I also want him to understand what's going on now.
Why isn't she already doing that with her kids?
You know,
I don't understand that.
Court just basically said that you can racially profile a child because they're brown skin and because they are speaking a different language and they have an accent, as Senator Choi mentioned, which, by the way, we love your accent and we're glad you're here. But to his point, too, is we want all of those stories to be told, and we are committed, regardless of what happens today. We are absolutely committed to ensuring that it gets funded and ensuring that our stories are told, too.
Funded.
So first of all, she's lying. Senator Gonzalez is lying when she talks about we want our stories told. Ethnic studies does not tell stories. It advances ideology. It does not talk about history. It does not talk about, little historic vignettes or important moments in history. It talks about
important, look, the thing that brought America to the point that it is today is the fact that you have ideas and values where
Right.
people came from all over the world to participate in this grand experiment, of the Republic and of the American Republic. And when you are hardworking and you put in the hours and you study hard and you do well, you can be anything you want in America. That is not the case in most of the countries where most of the people who are now Americans come from, right? So, and that includes the Latino community as well. Now, every time they advance that idea of, ethnic diversity, and she said diversity of opinions. Oh, bullshit. I'm sorry, but like, no, they don't want that.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
you called it. We're going to see it. She talks about funding. It's going to happen. Ethnic studies is going to be back on the plate. Just watch. You heard it here first.
So our message to people at the end of this podcast is to celebrate, if you like. You can celebrate the fact that the governor acknowledged that there is anti-Semitism in California public schools. You can celebrate the fact that we had a little bit of a conversation around anti-Semitism in public schools. Not enough of a conversation when only 2 Jewish students testified out of this entire year. And we're supposed to be focusing on anti-Semitism in public schools, and only 2 testified in 2 hearings. That is insufficient. And that is why, in my opinion, this is such a weak effort at the end of the day. So,
I want to just frame this as well. Because, okay, so okay, the definition of anti-Semitism that included singling out Israel, with the 3 Ds, was removed. Okay. So this is an anti-Semitism bill without a definition of anti-Semitism. So that's removed. The ability of a coordinator to actually investigate instances of anti-Semitism in school districts, removed. Okay. No investigative capacity at all. Enforcement of existing laws to protect Jews in school districts, removed. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what we have is a bill that calls itself the anti-Semitism bill, that does not have a definition of anti-Semitism, that cannot investigate instances of anti-Semitism in school districts, and cannot enforce existing laws to protect Jews against anti-Semitism. Correct?
Correct.
Great. What a fabulous waste of freaking time.
So this is the bill. We will see what happens coming in 2026. Just for people's knowledge and awareness, again, the message of this podcast is: do not get disengaged. Do not get complacent. Do not get drunk on happiness that you think this bill passed and therefore it's a panacea of solutions. It's not. This is a step in a process. The fact that Governor Newsom in his own signing statement said that he appreciates the firm commitment of the bill authors to address some of the issues means that this issue will be opened again as soon as possible. Now, what does that mean, as soon as possible? Right now, they could be, and frankly, they should be. I doubt they are, but they apparently there were lines in the bill that could lead to unintended consequences. And the hearings indicated that was around factually accurate instruction and probably other things, by the way. Once you open that Pandora's box, they're going to be looking at a lot of other things in this bill that they didn't like. Remember, the CTA, the California Teachers Association, and other unions significantly oppose this bill. If we don't think they are going to be waiting as soon as they can to get provisions amended or taken out or watered down, that's a big mistake. So how does this all work? Again, they could be working on text now. We're obviously not going to be in those conversations because we're not part of the teachers union. We're not part of the political class that has these discussions behind closed doors with these parties. So we're not going to know what's happening until we see legislation introduced. Now, luckily, ICAN has a very advanced system where we're monitoring every piece of legislation that is introduced or modified along the way. So we will pick up as soon as it hits the public record. But there's a kind of a technical aspect of this that I want people to understand, and hopefully it's not too technical, but essentially when a bill becomes a law, so when Newsom signed that bill yesterday, it does not become law today. It becomes law on January 1st, 2026. That is because it is not an urgency bill. It's not an emergency or urgency bill.
I beg to differ, but okay, whatever. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, according to the
for us, but yeah.
There are special designations in statute or in legislative processes that allow things to be called an emergency item or an urgency item, which means that when the
wildfires, like
the wildfire special session that we had earlier in the year, absolutely. And in this case, they have spoken about using urgency language. Now, what that means is that a bill can be passed and signed into law. And the moment it is signed into law, it then becomes law. It doesn't have to wait till January 1st the next year. This is important because what the discussion was around this bill was that when this text becomes the law of the land or law of the state of California on January 1st, teachers were concerned that this uncertain language would expose them to certain penalties or punitive response by districts or schools.
Like, it's so funny when
I don't know
they
what, but-
admit, it's like, oh, so
Right.
you're admitting that you're guilty, and now you're worried that you're actually going to get caught.
Yeah, you're gonna get caught either way. So just don't worry about it. So what they're looking at is having something ready to go as soon as possible. And I guarantee you they will be looking at dates of when schools start back, right? In mid-January, whenever, or early January.
Oh, yeah, I'll
when
tell you right
they
now.
start back. And they're going to try to get this language in. Now, I am skeptical that they will be able to get it in, and we'll see, just based on how this particular bill went over the session. But that is something for everybody to look out for. We will keep you updated and informed as to what that looks like. Again, celebrate if you like. Yes, the governor recognized anti-Semitism. The legislature passed a bill, but we are not done with the fight. The fight is ongoing. This is just a step in a very long process. So that is our main message here for today for this bill.
And yeah, for the parents out there, you have to keep a vigilant eye on what is going on in your kids' classrooms. You have to ask to see all of the material. Any teacher who refuses to show you their curriculum or their lesson plans or their syllabus, that's a huge red flag. Definitely get in touch with us and we can help you deal with that. It is a law for them to show what they are teaching your children. And so keep looking, keep reporting it to either Peer K-12, it's peerk12.org, or ICAN. Report the incidents. We can help you escalate them in the district and use legal recourse if necessary to make sure that your kids are protected with existing laws that have been there for a long time, by the way. We don't need this new law to, you don't have to wait till January 1st. But you gotta, we can't fight against something that we can't see and that we can't prove. We're the only ones who really have to prove nonstop that this is happening to us. So take a look at all of your kids' stuff. We're finding things all the time, things that we wouldn't have found had we not, really been looking. So you gotta actually open up the Chromebook and look in and see what is being taught. Oftentimes it is not what was approved by the school board. So that's another kind of issue. But and just like keep, I guess, a few grains of salt in with the celebratory, and know that we're still very much in the thick of this, and we have not seen the last of ethnic studies. I can promise you that, especially after now, and that we've seen this. And yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of a list they come up with for this anti-Semitism coordinator. It's going to be some like teacher union person, right? It's like just going to make it actually worse. I think what was that guy's name? Gabe Kahn or whatever?
He'd be fantastic.
The cosplay with the kippah, who was like so anti-Israel and said he was Jewish and everything. Like, it's going to be something like him.
I think former LAUSD school board president Jackie Goldberg, she's now retired. I'm sure she's available, and I'm sure the state of California would love to hire her for this purpose. We would not like her. she certainly is no fan of Israel or Israelis.
People and send it up to the governor's office.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a long
anti-Semitism coordinator.
Waiting list. Yeah, hopefully it's not a Jewish Voice for Peace type or a care representative.
Listen, today is going to be a happy day for me because we potentially are getting our hostages home safe finally after insane. Yes. The last 2 years have been just crazy insane, but I think the next 2 years are going to be even crazier. So, by the way, everyone, elections coming up in what's it, a month? What do you say, Dylan? No on Prop 50.
ICAN has taken the official position that we are no on Prop 50. If you look at I guess we can wrap up the podcast with this. But if you look at the candidates who would stand to benefit from the gerrymandering that the legislature is proposing, these are people who would make a lot of the anti-Semitism problems that we see much worse. and dilute some of the authority that we have at the federal level to kind of step in and look at this stuff. So we are a solid no on Prop 50. We do not need more extremists putting laws into place that create discriminatory systems that target Jews and people who associate with Jews. So we are a firm.
It's ironic that, you know, the Gavin Newsom and everybody talks all about, you know, a totalitarian, you know, regime at the federal level, and how he's like the savior of democracy or something. You know, like I'm not a huge fan of Gavin Newsom. That's a big secret. But what they're doing is taking the power of the people away with, you know, Prop 50. And so there's a citizens committee for this, which was voted on by the people. And now what they're trying to do is, and that's what, when Gavin Newsom says yes on 50, what he's saying is yes to take the power away from the people. So no on 50. Got it.
No on Prop, solid no on Prop 50.
No on ethnic studies funding.
And no on ethnic studies funding.
Hell no.
Our mission, by the way, guys, for everyone listening, will be to educate people about what ethnic studies really is again and again and again. It is not the study of different cultures and communities. It is the study of ideology. It promotes ideas like transformative resistance and radical healing, whatever that means. It promotes the fight against anthropocentrism, which is essentially capitalism, in favor of environmental policies and ideas. So this is a radical concept. So whatever Senator Gonzalez said previously is totally untrue. And we're going to have to work hard to educate these legislators moving forward about what this stuff really is. So with that, I think we will say farewell to everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It's been a long one. We apologize. We'll try to be more succinct in the future moving forward. But Nicole, I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of the Israeli American Podcast. And I hope you will join me often in these broadcasts.
Thank you all. Have a great evening, and I guess a good. I'm looking forward to the weekend for some more reasons to celebrate.
Hopefully, some good news on Shabbat. So we say Hag Sameach to everybody, and Shana Tova, Umetuka, all the good stuff, and we will see you.
That's a pretty good Hebrew Israeli accent. I like it.
I
got to get into a little bit more of the Hag Sameach.
Hag Sameach. All right, everyone. We will see you